everyone. That was a really nice introduction. I hope I can live up to the radness. Hi, everyone. I'm one of the people that raised their hands and said, this is my first Creative Morning, so thank you for welcoming me into your space. A couple things that I want to start with. We are on Treaty 6 territory, so I just want to mention that. And also, probably should have sent this out in social media beforehand, but trigger warning, we're going to talk about some sexual violence stuff that some may find disturbing. The CBC put that on their article as a warning, so just putting that out there. This topic can unearth some feelings, so if you need some support afterwards, I would encourage you to call the Sexual Assault Center's crisis line. It's 780-423-4121, and it's 24 hours, and they can help you out. So, with that said, a little housekeeping out of the way. Thank you so much for coming to hear me speak. You might be wondering who I am and why you've gotten up early on a Friday to come hear me, and I'm also wondering that. As Laurelyn mentioned, I have a lot of slashes these days, more than ever. I'm a burlesque performer with House of Hush Burlesque Collective. I'm a survivor of sexual violence. I'm a consultant with Hamner Monashaw Consulting. I'm a co-producer of Edmonton's Pub Choir, opening soon at the Grindstone Theatre. More on that later. And a very new dog mom. Shafraz asked, kind of with a very disappointed face, why I didn't bring my dog today. Please follow Whiskey Puggle on Instagram. She would love it. She's very cute. She's at home with a cone on, though, because she got spayed this week. She doesn't like it. So, courage. Whew. I was laughing yesterday about how scared I was to come deliver this talk about courage. And I thought, oh God, she's made a terrible, terrible decision. What I came to realize when I was thinking about it is, courage isn't the absence of fear. I mean, as humans, we would be like sociopaths if we didn't feel fear in a fear-inducing situation, right? So it's, for me anyway, it's more about feeling fear and doing something anyway. And so to that end, everyone here has been courageous. I don't want to pretend as the expert on courage, let me tell you a little bit about courage. Now, all of you have been courageous in some form. So whether that's eating expired yogurt from your fridge, or pitching a client on something that you're not 100% sure that you can pull off just yet, or singing a song at karaoke that's way out of your range, or maybe something big like coming out to your parents, or starting your own business, which I'm sure a lot of the folks in this room have done. I felt strange being asked to speak about courage because I don't really consider myself either an expert on the subject nor the most courageous person around. But I guess since, Malala wasn't available to come tell you about how to be an altruistic saint of pillar of courage, I'm here to chat about it, so I'll do my best. And I'm really grateful to be here with you this morning and talk with you about how courage has shown up in my life, and how you can support courage in those around you by being an ally. So, where does my story start? When Laura Lynn asked me to join you to speak about courage, I honestly wondered what she wanted me to talk about, because I'm preparing up for a burlesque show tonight, as I mentioned, and my brain was on burlesque, so I thought, striptease? Which almost led to a very different kind of talk this morning. I was getting out the glitter, and I went, no, it probably is because I told the CBC the other week that, I was raped. Maybe she wants me to talk about that. So I won't spend too much time on the nitty-gritty details, but just to give you a brief retelling, 15 years ago, a trusted friend raped me while I was at university. And I was 18 and and fresh into my first year of university, living on my own for the first time. And it was obviously really traumatic. It was a really unsettling event in my life. But I thought, I know what to do here. I'll just follow all the steps and do everything right. So I told my residence advisor, and then I told residence services, and then I went to the campus security, and I did all the things, right? I was being a good little survivor, because I believed that, good things happen to good people, and if bad things happen to a good person, I just had to tell people about it, and it would resolve itself. unfortunately, this wasn't the era of Me Too, and it wasn't Time's Up, and people, campus sexual violence wasn't something that was talked about in the same way as openly. So friends and classmates stopped talking to me, rumors were flying, and I was so, and some of my professors were really great about it, and others didn't know who I was, so kind of said, I'm sorry, like, you're on your own. And so it was really tough. I was really alienated in my small campus, and I ended up dropping out of university. Fun aside, the perpetrator went on to get his PhD, so and one really important point was that campus security actually advised me not to go to the police. They said that it would interfere with their investigation. And again, being the dutiful survivor, I said, okay, yeah, whatever you think is best. And they handed me a whistle and a brochure for their self-defense classes. And so I went home thinking, okay, I've done everything that I can do, everything that I'm supposed to do, and now I'll just wait for justice. I was like, okay, here it goes. Month goes by, I don't hear anything, and I was, at this point, no one was talking to me. It had gotten really toxic, so I left residence, moved home, wasn't going to school anymore, flunked out of university, and my residence advisor asked her to call campus security and just check in on the investigation that they assured me they were doing. And they said, oh, actually, we decided not to pursue an investigation. Full stop. No reason, just given. They just said, we haven't decided not to. So obviously that was pretty devastating, and I didn't want to, I thought, well, if these campus cops don't believe me, I'm not going to, now take my story to another set of strangers at the police station and report there. So I just didn't. And it was, a while before I could sort of pull my life together, and a big part of pulling my life together was going to SACE, so the Sexual Assault Center of Edmonton, and the support of some of my family and friends. It was a mixed bag of reactions. Most people, I think, honestly, just didn't know how to respond, which I'll talk to a little bit in a bit. But at SACE, I was believed from the minute I walked in the door, and that was an incredibly important part of my healing process, was that I was believed right away. There was no question about it. It wasn't like going to campus security. It wasn't like going to a residence advisor that said, really, him? I can't believe it, kind of thing, right? They said, we believe you. How can we help? What do you need from us? And so that's really critical. I will plug them a lot. I don't work for them, but I just think they are the best organization around. So I was lucky at the time. The wait times were moderate to see a counselor, because SACE they don't want cost to be a barrier for treatment. I didn't pay a cent to get world-class specialized counseling. And while I waited for that, I got a group session with some folks, fellow survivors, and that was really helpful too, to hear other people's stories and feel less alone. These days, though, the wait times at most of Alberta's sexual assaults service providers are in the 2 to 6 month range. So imagine going through all that and picking up the phone and you're like, okay, I'm ready to seek help, and then, sorry, you have to wait, 6 months. Terrible. Which is why the historic $8.1 million investment by the Nali government is life-changing for survivors of sexual violence in this province. So, but I've gotten really off topic. So, yes, I never thought that reporting to the police would be part of my healing journey. It's something that I'm considering now, 15 years later. But it wasn't the time of Me Too. People were not talking about sexual violence and general, it wasn't in the paper, and there wasn't the same level of sort of general support. Now I'm happy to say that there are lots of signs of hope. I mean, we have, I think all of the universities in the province now are developing sexual violence policies for their campuses. It's not perfect, but we're getting there. At least there's a conversation now. Obviously, universities are still, they don't have an interest in sharing the details of how many reports they get on campus, because they are attracting research dollars and new students, and so I don't blame the campus security for following that ethos of trying to protect the university, but it certainly, their response to me certainly didn't help me feel brave enough to keep pursuing justice, right? So the nice part about my journey is that it did lead me to SACE, and I did connect with some of the supports that I needed, and so they are big promoters of there's hope for healing, and I'm like to think that I'm here because of SACE. So that's my personal story, but really, I mean, my story is sadly typical, with 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men experiencing sexual violence in their lifetime, most often by a man in either case. It's shockingly common. So people in this room, that's why I wanted the warning, because people in this room likely have experienced sexual violence as well, or someone you know, someone in your family, one of your colleagues. It's also typically perpetrated by a man and someone known to the victim. Could be a current or a former romantic partner, maybe a friend, a boss, a date, a family member, a coach, a doctor. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that gender and sexual minorities and Indigenous women experience sexual violence at disproportionately high rates compared to the rest of us. So, brings me to the courage part of our talk. So I thought, okay, I've gotten through this really nasty part of my life. It took me much longer than I would have liked to move past that. But again, there were pockets of support. It wasn't now. The context wasn't of believing and supporting survivors at that time. And that said, my life oozes privilege. I am so fortunate. I mean, like, white, able-bodied, middle-class family from St. Albert. Like, and my parents were lovely and supportive and had the financial means to, like, kind of shrug their shoulders when I flunked out of university and when I needed to just move back home and be kind of a flunky for a little bit. And all that said, it was still so hard for all those years. And so I think about all the people who don't have all of those lifelines around them, who experience sexual violence, and how our paths are very different. So I thought about, okay, since I have this privilege and I'm coming from a place of relative healing from trauma, I thought, okay, how can I, now what? And I'll come back to this a couple times, but I don't think of courage as something like, and then I woke up and decided to be an inspiration for sexual violence survivors. No, I'm not going to pretend that. I don't even think that today. But courage for me is like 1,000 little steps, right? So it's I woke up and I thought, okay, I'm gonna take classes at university. When I went back to university, I'm gonna take classes about like women's stuff, and maybe I'll also volunteer at the Women in Trans Center on campus and just kind of like check out what's there. That was a crazy, mind-blowing experience where a little sheltered, St. Albert kid meets Muslim women who are using the prayer room and talking about access to good medical care that's culturally sensitive. And I was like, whoa. And then the queer women who were like, I also, my doctor said some really terribly offensive stuff. And I was like, whoa. So, little privileged white girl has been having her mind blown by intersectional feminism at university and realizing, okay, so like if I sit on this tower of privilege, like how can I use my voice in a way to help others feel courageous and live their lives as they want to? And when I came back to Edmonton, I wouldn't have told you, I was in Toronto first, when I came back to Edmonton, wouldn't have said, I bet you it's through politics. Yeah, that'll be how I do it. That was kind of a fluke thing. I fell into working for Councillor Ben Henderson, as Laura Lynn mentioned, at Edmonton City Hall, and learned a lot about, interesting, from the inside, there's lots of things you can do with this power. And how can so thinking about like little ways that you can use power and privilege to affect positive change. And And then I worked for Amarjeet Sohi, then a lowly counselor before he was a big deal federal minister. And I learned all these, I started to see like, oh wow, you could just make stuff happen when you have power. This is crazy. You can just literally decide like, now you can't speed past a playground, and you there, we're gonna have we're gonna have a whole on the bus, like a stop sexual harassment on the bus campaign. Make it so. And they just did this stuff, and it was crazy to me. And I thought, that's what I want to do. I just want to make stuff better by like decree, wand, make things better. So I kept working with politicians, and that was ups and downs and wild times. So I've worked on lots of different political campaigns and supported some really excellent candidates. After working for two men, I decided that I would only work with women. So since that time, I've worked with some really fantastic women. And wait, that sounded weird. Not because they were terrible men. They're both lovely men. Very courageous, respectful, lovely men doing great things. But I decided that women needed the most help. And so I was going to take my expertise and help women. That's how I want to phrase that. That led me to, in a circuitous way, working for the Rachel Notley government, which was a tremendous honor and privilege, and one in which I felt for the very first time, holy crap, my values are reflected in the people that I'm working for in a really genuine way. And they're talking about feminism in politics, like explicitly. They're like, we are a feminist government. Mind blown. And so I ended up working for the Minister of Status of Women, and I got to work on sexual violence prevention initiatives and talk about gender inequality and talk about the pay gap, well, a little bit, it's a touchy subject, and talk about women in STEM and meet all these incredibly badass women who were doing incredible things throughout the province. It was a really transformational role for me. And so it was about 2 years at the legislature, and I decided that I needed just a change of scenery. And so I moved on to be a principal at Havner-Modishaw Consulting, and we help small to medium businesses and nonprofits with all kinds of organizational needs. My area of interest is around helping organizations rape-proof themselves, if you will, in a nutshell. And that's been a really interesting conversation to have with different organizations as well. I'm sorry if anyone thought this was going to be a linear conversation. I'm really sorry about that. Where I was getting back to was, so I'm no longer with the Notley government, but I went to attend their announcement about the funding for sexual assault services 2 weeks ago, maybe? Yeah, right before International Women's Day. And I was there in the audience just like feeling the love and the excitement and crying with everyone else who's been advocating for this for so long. $8.1 million is massive and historic and will like greatly cut down those wait times that I mentioned across the province, and especially in areas where services just weren't around. And so I'm there and I'm crying and I'm feeling all emotional, and I get this text from the minister's press secretary, who's a dear friend of mine. And she says, hey, and it was kind of a weird ask, but journalists are asking if there's like a personal story they can add to their stories. Do you want to just talk about like your story? I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. Yeah, I can do that. So yeah, thank you for laughing, right? Because I was like, oh yeah, sure, whatever. Yeah, no problem. Yeah. Do they need me now? Yeah, sure, here. Great. So I was raped 15 years ago. Yeah. And yeah, I definitely wasn't thinking about it's been, because I've been working in this area and talking about it for a long time, I wasn't like, I'm doing this big courageous thing today and I'm gonna give a voice for survivors. Like, it wasn't that at all. It was just the next step in all the little steps, right? It was just the next step for me. And but even now when I talk about it, I'm getting goosebumps, because since I went on the radio and talked to CBC about what happened to me, and Mary Jane James, the executive director of Sexual Assault Center, was there talking about what the funding means for them. It was like, again, all of these people started reaching out to me, both in just sort of generally supportive ways, but also with, we call it the club. It's like a really sad club. As soon as you disclose publicly, or even like at a party, I'm a real downer at parties, or just to friends that you've experienced sexual violence, out of the woodwork, people will start coming up to you and saying, "Me too." And that's something that I hadn't quite prepared for, I hadn't braced myself for, but I'm glad that people felt safe talking to me, and I do welcome that. But it was a reminder, oh yeah, like, right, I still have this voice, and it's really important that I use it because I can sit on the radio and I can talk about this. And I texted my mom, my dad, and my partner right before I went, by the way, I'm going to be on the radio talking about the sexual assault today, just a heads up. Because sure enough, people contact, my name is very unique, so there's not many of us in town, so I didn't want my dad to be surprised in the elevator when his colleague is like, "Oh, heard about your daughter's rape on the radio yesterday." So I thought I'd give them a heads up because I'm approaching this so flippantly, but they might not. And sure enough, like, they also got reached out to by a number of people talking about it. And it reminds me, like, oh yeah, not everyone's talking about their like traumatic experiences in a public way. Oh yeah, maybe it is like really powerful thing that I do that. So I've spent way too much of this talking about myself. All that to say, I didn't realize what I was doing was courageous, and I don't even really think it is. It was just the next step in what I could do with what I have. And what's really exciting now is that we have this like sea change towards people generally wanting to be good allies and supporters and help people feel the kind of courage that I feel to say those things without shame. And so I want to impart some of that, those tools to you today. So here's how you can be an ally and support survivors and help them feel courageous. If someone discloses to you, just say the following words, really straightforward: "I believe you." That's it. You just have to say, "I believe you." Don't ask them for the nitty-gritty details. It doesn't matter. Those don't matter. I know you probably want to know because we crave the details to make sense of things. Don't. Just say, "I believe you." Then ask them what they need from you. Listen to their answer and respect it. So you might think, okay, we're gonna call SACE. We're gonna get you. We're gonna, let's get X, Y, Z. Ask them what they need, and then listen to the answer and give them those things. And then the third thing that I want to ask of you, especially as folks that have reaches into the creative industry and far and wide, is to use survivor supporting language. One of the biggest, I want to give such a shout out to CBC. The way they covered my story was so respectful and compassionate. And when I think about what would have happened if I had told my story 15 years ago, I don't think it would have been covered in the same way. Portia Clark was so excellent, and that's not by accident, right? When we know how the power of language, when we talk about a topic, a thorny criminal topic that involves sex, like sexual assault, have the respect and decency to tread lightly and carefully to respect survivors' healing process. And so that means not talking about what they're wearing and like encouraging any of those rape myths around were they drinking, what were they doing, how did they somehow bring this upon themselves. Talk about it like you would any other crime. Talk about the person who committed it. And that's how you can be an ally and help others feel the courage to come forward and seek out help and support. Because I wouldn't be here if I hadn't sought that help, right? I wouldn't be able to speak to you about my story, and it wouldn't be an event that was incorporated into my life as just yet another event in the tapestry, right? It would be this like life-changing, ending kind of traumatic event. And so that's what happens if people don't seek out support. So it's all of our jobs to help survivors seek out that support and just be there for them however they need. So on that note, SACE, they have individual and group counseling. They have groups for supporters of survivors. So if your partner has experienced sexual violence and you want to know how better to support them, you can reach out. And they also do public education. So they do like 400 sessions a year. They're very busy, but they will come to your workplace or your organization and deliver a tailored presentation to your group. They're excellent, so I recommend that. What else? Oh, we just want to touch briefly some of the ways that I benefited from this really weird, it's a weird way of putting it, that I benefited from having a terrible thing happening and kind of twirling it around. As I mentioned, I'm a burlesque performer. Feels strange to say that, because I was saying to Shafraz earlier, this will be the first time publicly that I talk about burlesque with my Carlynn hat on instead of my burlesque persona hat on, but I think it's an important part of my story. It was a big part of helping me reclaim my own body and my own sexuality in a way that was mine alone, and healthy and positive and fun and not marked by anyone's actions on my body. Because it's a very feminist art form, and it's very empowering. So I'd welcome you all to our next show, April 13th. And what other things that were sort of fun offshoots? I never would have been on the board of the Sexual Assault Center, which I was for almost a decade. And I wouldn't have worked for the Status of Women Minister. I mean, all of these things happened because of this terrible thing and the little steps I took every day to just first survive and then figure out how I could use my voice to make things better for other people. So, so Courage by 1,000 Steps, don't think of it as one massive leap. Just show up and step by step. Do you want me to say any more? I don't know. What should I talk about? I don't know. I'm kind of interested if you have questions that could help me figure out what else you'd want to talk about.
That's our next segment.
We didn't even practice that.
How about like a round of applause for